That's my seat. Tell him to move.
Sir, take 14C or leave the aircraft.
My ticket says 2A. Call your supervisor. System-wide ground hold. All departures are frozen.
That's my seat. Darius Cole said it without raising his voice, one hand resting on the overhead bin above 2A. His boarding pass was still open on his phone. Flight 61 FAR, Chicago to Seattle, seat 2A. Outside the window, a fuel truck idled beneath the wing while rain streaked the glass in thin silver lines. The woman sitting in 2A glanced at the phone, then at Darius. She was white, maybe early 50s, wrapped in a cream cashmere coat that looked too warm for the cabin. Her leather tote occupied the space beneath the seat in front of her. A half-finished sparkling water already sat on the tray beside her. "I think you're mistaken," she said. Darius looked at the row marker above them. Yes, I know what seat this is." The answer came quickly enough to make the man across the aisle lower his newspaper. Darius was 48, broad-shouldered, with closely cropped hair touched by gray at the temples. He wore dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, and worn brown boots, instead of the suit people usually associated with executive travel. His only unusual accessory was a slim aluminum luggage tag engraved with 3 small letters, AVE. Nobody in the cabin seemed to notice it. The woman reached for her own boarding pass but stopped before unlocking her phone. "The gate agent moved me up here." "Then they should have issued you another seat." She gave him a patient smile, usually reserved for someone who had missed an obvious point. "They did." "Which one?" Her smile disappeared. A flight attendant approaching from the galley caught only the last question. Her nameplate read Melissa. "Is there a problem?" The woman answered first. "This gentleman is insisting I leave my seat." Lisa looked from her to Darius. Her eyes paused on his sweater, his boots, the small backpack hanging from his shoulder. Darius noticed the inventory. He had seen that kind of glance before. Not hostile enough to complain about. Not long enough to quote in a report. Just a silent calculation about who probably belonged where. He held out his phone. "I'm assigned 2A. Melissa barely looked at it. "Sir, sometimes we make last-minute seating adjustments." "Of course. Where was I moved?" Melissa hesitated. The woman in the window seat turned toward the rain again, as if the matter had already become somebody else's administrative chore. "I don't have the updated manifest in front of me," Melissa said. Darius looked toward the open aircraft door. Boarding was still underway. A gate agent stood 10 yards away, scanning the final passengers. "Then we can check." "That really isn't necessary." "It is if you're telling me I don't have the seat printed on my boarding pass." Melissa's expression tightened. "You're blocking the aisle." That was technically true. The passengers had gathered behind him. Darius stepped fully into the empty space beside 2C. There, Azel's clear. The man across from him folded his newspaper now. He was older, with a navy baseball cap and the weathered hands of someone who worked outside. He watched Melissa take Darius's phone at last. She examined the screen. Her thumb stopped moving. "Where did you get this boarding pass?" Darius stared at her. "From your airline. I mean, did someone at the gate print this for you?" "No." Melissa handed the phone back. Behind her, a soft double chime sounded from the galley panel. Darius knew that tone. Most passengers did not. It meant the aircraft door had not yet been cleared for closure. He also knew something else Melissa apparently did not expect him to know. If a confirmed first-class passenger had been reassigned after boarding began, the seat change should already be visible in the cabin service tablet clipped beside the forward jump seat. Melissa had not checked it. Neither had the woman produced a boarding pass. Darius nodded toward the tablet. "Pull up the seat map." Lisa's face changed by half a degree. "Sir, I'm asking you to take 14C for now so we can get everyone seated." Darius thought he had misheard her. 14C? It's an aisle seat. The woman in 2A looked back at him then. "That seems reasonable." Darius met her eyes. Across the aisle, the man with the baseball cap muttered, "Would it seem reasonable if it were yours?" Melissa heard him. Her attention snapped toward the witness, then back to Darius. "Sir, if you refuse the reassignment, I'll have to document you as unwilling to comply with crew instructions." There it was. Not a seat correction, not a verification. A behavioral record. Darius looked past her toward the cockpit, where a narrow strip of amber light glowed beneath the door. He had spent enough years inside airline operations to know how quickly one inaccurate sentence could become an official version of events. He slipped his phone into his pocket. "Before you document anything," he said, Get the gate supervisor and preserve the original seat assignment in the passenger record. Melissa gave a short laugh. We don't take instructions from passengers about our records. Darius glanced at the aluminum tag on his bag. AV, the initials belonged to a company almost everyone on this aircraft worked for. He had no intention of explaining that yet. Then put your instruction to me in writing, he said. Melissa reached for the cabin phone. Fine. A moment later, Darius heard her speak toward the galley, low but distinct. I need a supervisor on board. First-class passenger refusing a crew-directed seat reassignment. The wrong version had officially started moving. Part 2, the gate supervisor boarded carrying a handheld scanner and the expression of a man who had already been told what kind of problem he was coming to solve. Mr. Cole? Darius nodded. I'm Jonah Reed, station supervisor. I understand you're refusing a crew instruction. Melissa stood beside the galley curtain, arms folded loosely. Behind Jonah, the last two passengers waited on the jet bridge while rain ticked against the fuselage. The woman in 2A had put in earbuds, though Darius noticed she had not started playing anything. That isn't what happened, he said. I was assigned this seat. Someone else is occupying it. I asked for the reassignment record. Jonah glanced toward Melissa. He was offered another seat, she said. He became resistant when I explained we needed him to cooperate. Darius almost interrupted. The word resistant bothered him more than he expected. His mother had spent 32 years as a school secretary in Milwaukee, and she used to keep copies of every disciplinary note sent home about him because, she said, adjectives had a way of becoming facts once they entered a file. He let Melissa finish. He's also questioning crew procedures during boarding, she added. You're already running 6 minutes behind. Jonah turned back. Mr. Cole, we need to prioritize an on-time departure and cabin safety, then check the seat transaction. Then, this isn't really about the seat anymore. That happened fast. The man across the aisle lowered his newspaper again. Jonah's mouth tightened. It's about following crew direction. Darius pointed toward the handheld scanner. Pull up my passenger record. If 2A was legitimately reassigned, there'll be a transaction showing who changed it, when it changed, and what seat replaced it. Jonah studied him for a moment. You work in aviation? Oops. I know how reservation systems work. It was only part of the answer. Alder Vista Air had spent 18 months replacing the software Jonah was holding. Darius had sat through enough implementation reviews to recognize the faint vibration the device made before displaying a locally executed seat override. He also knew the company had prohibited undocumented premium cabin swaps after an internal revenue audit the previous spring. Jonah tapped through several screens. Melissa looked toward 2A. For the first time, the woman removed one earbud. Is there really a need for all this? She asked. I was told I could sit here. By whom? Darius asked. The woman at the gate. Did she issue a new boarding pass? A pause. No, she said they would sort it out. Jonah stopped tapping. That was Melissa's opportunity. Darius saw it arrive and disappear. She could have said they needed to reset the cabin, verify both assignments, and correct the mistake. Instead, she stepped closer to Jonah and lowered her voice without lowering it enough. She's a priority customer. We were handling a service recovery issue. Darius looked at Jonah's scanner. Does service recovery authorize taking a confirmed passenger's seat without reissuing not answer directly? What I have here, he said, is a cabin report stating you refused an instruction and challenged a crew member after being offered comparable accommodation. 14C is not comparable to 2A. It gets you to Seattle. So would the cargo hold. That doesn't make it the product I purchased. The man with the newspaper coughed into his fist, poorly hiding a laugh. Even Darius felt the corner of his mouth move. The moment lasted barely a second, but it loosened something in his chest. Then Jonah turned his screen slightly away. Darius caught the top line before it disappeared. PAX disruptive during reseat, not resistant. Disruptive. Across the aisle, the older passenger pulled a pen from his jacket. On the white margin of his newspaper, he wrote something, checked his watch, then added the time beneath it. Darius nodded toward the scanner. Who entered that note? Jonah looked at Melissa. Melissa said, I documented the interaction. You documented a disruption that didn't occur. I documented your behavior as I experienced it. Jonah exhaled through his nose. Metrics were losing their fight with the clock. Mr. Cole, I can still resolve this simply. Take 14C and we move on. Remove the false behavioral note, verify the seat record, and I'll cooperate with whatever the record actually shows. Jonah shook his head. Then you're choosing not to comply. No, you're choosing not to verify. Jonah pressed his thumb to the scanner. A tone sounded. On the screen, Darius's boarding status changed from green to amber. Crew off-nud requested. Jonah looked toward the cockpit. I'm notifying the captain that we have a passenger who won't comply with cabin instructions. Lisa said nothing. Neither did the woman in Darius's seat. The man across the aisle wrote down the exact words. Part 3. The captain arrived without his jacket. He introduced himself as Captain Ellis, listened to Jonah for less than a minute, then looked at Darius from the threshold of the cockpit. Sir, I'm told you've been given a seat and are refusing to take it. I was given 2A, Darius said. Then I was ordered into 14C without a documented reassignment. When I asked them to verify the record, a disruption note was added to my file. Ellis glanced at Jonah. Jonah held up the scanner. He's continuing to challenge the crew instead of complying. Darius felt the familiar temptation to speak faster when somebody was making him sound unreasonable. He had spent years training himself out of it. Faster became louder in somebody else's report. Computer became aggressive. By the time the adjectives reached an investigation, the original question could disappear entirely. Stop. Captain, have you personally reviewed the seat history? No. Have you seen me threaten anyone? No. Raise my voice. Ellis shifted his weight. That's not the standard I'm dealing with. I have a crew member telling me she cannot complete boarding while this dispute continues. It was the first explanation Darius had heard that made operational sense. The mistake came in what Ellis did with it. Then I'm directing you to leave the aircraft, the captain said. The older man across the aisle folded his newspaper and stood. Captain, for whatever it's worth, I watched the whole thing. Melissa turned. Sir, please remain seated. I'm not interfering. He pulled the newspaper page from the fold. 4 times were written along its margin. I'm telling you he didn't cause the delay. They spent most of it refusing to check his seat. Jonah's expression hardened. What's your name? Raymond Pike. Darius looked at him for the first time long enough to register the faded union pin on his cap. Raymond tore off the newspaper margin, wrote a phone number beneath the Times, and held it toward Darius. Melissa stepped between them. You cannot exchange materials while we're conducting a removal. Raymond stared at her. It's my newspaper. Darius almost smiled again, but there was no room for it now. He accepted the strip. Thank you. Then he picked up his backpack. The woman in 2A finally turned fully toward him. Her face had lost some of its certainty. I didn't ask them to remove you. Darius adjusted the strap on his shoulder. He also never showed them a boarding pass. She opened her mouth, then looked away. He walked off the aircraft under his own power. That distinction mattered. At the gate podium, his phone vibrated. Original mobile boarding pass had gone gray. Boarding, COOD, see agent. A second notification followed. Travel restricted pending crew review. Darius stopped walking. A canceled seat was one problem. A conduct restriction could follow him onto another flight, trigger secondary review, and survive long after everyone aboard Flight 61 had forgotten what happened. The gate agent avoided his eyes. Can you rebook me? She typed his name, then frowned. I can't touch the reservation while that code is active. How long? Could be a few hours. Could be tomorrow. Customer resolution has to clear it. Tomorrow. Darius was supposed to be in Seattle that evening for his daughter Lena's graduate architecture exhibition. She had made him promise, twice, that work would not become the reason he missed another important night. He looked through the terminal glass at the aircraft. The jet bridge door had closed. Print my current passenger record, he said. I'm not authorized to print internal remarks. Then give me the incident reference number. She hesitated before writing it on a receipt. Darius read the number once and opened a browser on his phone. Alder Vista's public privacy portal contained a little-used request labeled Preserve Records Related to a Disputed Travel Action. He knew exactly where it was because he had demanded that legal keep it when someone proposed removing it during a website redesign. He entered the incident number, seat history, passenger remarks, scanner transactions, crew report revisions. He checked every available category. Before submitting, he added one sentence, preserve the original values and all subsequent edits, including timestamps and user credentials. Then he pressed submit. A confirmation number appeared. Across the glass, Flight 61 pushed back from the gate, with another passenger still sitting in Darius Cole's seat. Jonah and Melissa believed the problem had left the airplane. What they had actually done was make the record impossible to quietly rewrite. Part 4. Darius stayed near Gate C-19 after Flight 614 disappeared beyond the rain. He could have gone to the lounge. He could have called somebody with enough access to make the restriction disappear. Instead, he bought bad terminal coffee and sat beneath a departure board that kept changing Seattle from delayed to departed, as if the airport needed to remind him what he had lost. His daughter called at 4:42. He watched Lena's name vibrate across the screen before answering. "You're not on the plane." It was not a question. No, a pause followed. Somewhere behind her, Darius heard voices and the scrape of display panels being moved across a concrete floor. What happened? Seat problem. Dad, it became a bigger seat problem. She exhaled. "My presentation starts at 7. I know, you said you'd be here before 6. I know that too." He rubbed his thumb across the edge of Raymond Pike's torn newspaper strip. The ink had bled slightly where rainwater from somebody's coat had touched it. "There's another flight through Denver," Lena said. "Can you take that?" "They put a conduct restriction on my reservation." This time her silence was different. "Because you argued?" "Then because what?" Darius looked toward the empty gate podium. "Because I asked them to check something they didn't want to check." Lena gave a tired little laugh. "Which is basically your favorite hobby." He smiled despite himself. Then she said, "Don't turn this into work." The smile disappeared. "It already is." "No, I mean don't do the thing where somebody hurts you and suddenly you become the person responsible for fixing the institution." Darius leaned back. Years earlier, after Lena's mother died, he had handled grief the same way he handled failed operations. Identify the failure, assign ownership, build a corrective plan. Lena had been 16. She had once told him she sometimes wanted a father, not a response team. He had never forgotten it. "I'm trying to get to you," he said. "Then get here." "That's what I want." After they hung up, Darius opened the preservation confirmation again. He almost closed it. Instead, he made a choice he knew Lena would hate. He stayed. At 5:03, the portal changed status from received to legal hold initiated. That should have frozen every related transaction. 3 minutes later, another message appeared. Supplemental incident statement added. Darius stared at the timestamp. The aircraft was already airborne. Someone had amended the record after the preservation request. He opened the customer-facing incident page. The new summary now said he had repeatedly refused seating instructions, delayed boarding, and required captain intervention after escalating concerns regarding cabin placement. Escalating concerns. The phrase was polished enough to hide what had happened. Darius took screenshots, then stopped. Screenshots were useful, but they were not the underlying record. He called the number on the back of his travel card and asked for customer resolution. The representative who answered sounded young and cautious. "I can see the restriction," she said. "I'm not permitted to remove it. I'm not asking you to." That surprised her. "What do you need?" "Tell me whether the incident has an audit lock indicator." A longer pause. "Sir, passengers normally wouldn't know that field exists." Darius looked at the aluminum AVA tag hanging from his backpack. "I know." The keys clicked. "Yes," she said finally. "There's a preservation flag. And was the supplemental statement entered before or after that flag?" I'm not sure I'm allowed to answer that." "Don't tell me who entered it. Just tell me the sequence." Silence. "Then, after." Darius closed his eyes. That was the third clue, and this one frightened him more than losing 2A. The system was supposed to warn employees before modifying a held incident. If somebody had added language afterward, either they had ignored the warning or their station permissions were bypassing a safeguard that should not have been bypassable. "Thank you," he said. "Change anything." "I wasn't going to." "Good." He ended the call and texted Lena that he was sorry. Then he opened a secure contact on his phone he had avoided using for nearly an hour. He did not ask for his seat back. He did not ask for anyone to be fired. He sent the incident number and one instruction: free C-19 station audit logs. "Do not alert local management yet." The reply came less than a minute later. Understood. There are 3 other preserved incidents tied to the same supervisor credentials. Darius read the message twice. Flight 61 had started with 1 stolen seat. It no longer looked like one mistake. At 5:19, Darius's phone rang. "Nia Grant." the caller said. I'm in the operations center. Tell me you're not still at O'Hare. I'm still at O'Hare. A chair scraped somewhere on her end. Nia had run safety and operational integrity for Alder Vista Air for 6 years. She disagreed with Darius often enough that their executive meetings occasionally ended with both of them irritated and usually better decisions. I pulled the audit trail you sent, she said. Your preservation flag worked. The supplemental statement came 11 minutes after the hold. Can local supervisors override it? They shouldn't be able to. Shouldn't? I'm choosing that word on purpose. Darius stood and walked away from the crowded gate. Through a service window, he could see baggage carts moving beneath sodium lights, orange rain covers snapping in the wind. What did you find? Jonah Reed's credentials touched 4 preserved passenger incidents in 7 months. In 3 of them, narrative fields were edited after the passengers disputed the original reports. Nia stopped. Same type of complaint, not exactly. 2 seat disputes, 1 involuntary downgrade. Denied boarding. And the passengers? Nia was quiet for a beat. 3 black, 1 Latino. He looked back towards C-19. That fact mattered, but it did not prove motive by itself. Don't build a conclusion from demographics, he said. I wasn't planning to. What do the edits have in common? You make the passenger sound harder to manage after the fact. That was worse. Not because it proved discrimination yet, but because it suggested the records used to justify decisions were being cleaned in one direction. Who can bypass the preservation warning? Darius asked. They're checking. Check before anyone interviews Reed, already doing it. Darius heard keyboards, then a muffled voice asking Nia something. She came back sharper. Darius. There's another problem. The audit console shows the local station role is inheriting a permission it shouldn't have. From where? Legacy Irregular Operations Access. He knew the category. During storms, cancellations, diversions, and aircraft swaps, supervisors needed broad tools to move passengers quickly. Those permissions had been carried over from the old reservation platform during migration. They were never supposed to touch protected incident history. How many stations have that role? We don't know yet. That answer changed the size of the room around him. Darius looked at the departure board. Dallas, Boston, Phoenix, Portland. Alder Vista aircraft were leaving gates across the country every few minutes. Can somebody use that permission to alter anything operational? Passenger records, yes. Crew qualification or aircraft release, no. You certain? No. He hated that answer because Nia never used it casually. Then we treat this as a control integrity problem until we know the boundary. I agree. For the first time since 2A, Darius used the authority he had kept out of sight. Avdate Executive Incident Protocol. Bring in technology risk, flight operations and legal. Independent log review. No local deletions, no credential resets. Nia paused. You understand that creates a board notifiable event. I do, and if the permission leak crosses into safety-critical systems, operations will have to stop departures until we prove it doesn't. I know. Her daughter's exhibition is tonight. Darius stared through the glass. I know that too. A gate agent approached from behind him. Mr. Cole? It was the same woman who had given him the incident number. Her face had changed. Station management wants to speak with you. Darius covered the phone. She looked uncertain. They received a call from headquarters. Nia heard enough to understand. I didn't call them. Neither had Darius. The gate agent swallowed. Sir, they told me to ask whether you're actually Darius Cole. He lowered the phone. What did you tell them? Your reservation says Darius M. Cole. And? She glanced at the aluminum tag on his backpack. I think they searched your name. Yay. Across the concourse, Jonah Reed emerged from an office carrying his scanner. He saw Darius and stopped so abruptly that another employee nearly walked into him. The recognition on Jonah's face was immediate. Darius felt no satisfaction. He had been entitled to 2A before Jonah knew who he was. Yeah. Darius said into the phone, watching Jonah approach. Do not let my title become the reason this gets corrected. It won't. Good. Then she added, technology risk just found the inherited permission at 12 stations. Darius turned toward the windows. Fill them. Another Alder Vista jet began pushing away from its gate. How far does the access reach? We're testing that now. Darius watched the tug turn the aircraft toward the taxi lane. Then test it before another departure relies on a system we haven't proved clean. Part 6 by 537, gate C-19 had stopped looking like a place people traveled through. two station managers stood behind the podium speaking into headsets. A technology risk analyst had joined Nia's call. Jonah Reed had been told to surrender his scanner and remain available for interview. Melissa, now somewhere over Michigan, had been removed from service for her return segment pending review. Not disciplined, Nia emphasized, simply taken out of the chain while the facts were preserved. Then the airport director approached Darius with an offer. "We can get you to Seattle tonight," she said. "United has a seat leaving in 40 minutes, first class. Car waiting when you land." Darius looked at the departure time. He could still catch the final half of Lena's exhibition. For 3 seconds, he wanted nothing more. "Has my conduct restriction been removed?" "I can take care of that." "That wasn't my question." The director hesitated. "Customer resolution is working on it." "And the other 3 passengers?" Her face tightened. "Mr. Cole, those matters are separate." "No, they're inconvenient. We don't know yet if they're separate." Vickers spoke through his phone. "Darius, take the flight." He turned away from the podium. "You just told me 12 stations have the same permission, and I have people handling it. You also told me you don't know what the permission can reach. I told you we're testing. That's why I'm staying." Nia's irritation came through clearly. "You staying in Chicago does not make the test safer." She was right, which made him more annoyed. Darius walked to the window and watched a baggage loader guide containers toward an Alder Vista 737. "What's the current boundary?" The technology risk analyst answered. "We confirmed the role can alter post-boarding passenger status on closed segments." Darius stopped. "After final count?" "Yes, that status feeds load planning." "It feeds passenger zone counts," the analyst corrected. "But we have not established that an unauthorized edit propagates into an accept-SID load sheet." Nia cut in. "That distinction matters." It did. An editable passenger record was a serious control failure. A compromised final load calculation was something else entirely. "Can you test propagation without touching an active aircraft?" Darius asked. "We have a completed training segment in production for this morning. Same aircraft type, same interface. Can replay the transaction against the archived load record." "Do it," Nia interrupted. "Wait." Darius heard papers move on her end. "If the replay shows the passenger count can change after load acceptance, 12 stations is no longer the question. The inherited role exists elsewhere under different names. How long to map all of them? Too long for tonight's departure bank." That was the operational problem now. Not 2A. An access control nobody could yet prove was isolated from a safety-related output. Darius looked at the aircraft below. Its cargo door closed with a hydraulic thump he could feel faintly through the glass. "Want departures held at the 12 confirmed stations?" "No," Nia said. The airport director stared at his phone. Darius turned slightly away. "No. A CEO does not make a network safety decision because he is furious about how he was treated." The words stung because they found something real. "I'm not furious about the seat. You missed your daughter's exhibition, got falsely coded as disruptive, and just discovered somebody edited your incident after preservation. You are furious." Darius said nothing. Nia continued. "So am I. That is why flight operations makes the call." He watched a ramp worker disconnect ground power. "Do you recommend?" "A precautionary departure hold at the 12 confirmed stations while we run the propagation test. 20 minutes initially. If the load sheet stays sealed, we narrow the response. If it changes, we escalate immediately." Darius exhaled. "Approved." "No," Nia said again. "Not approved. Acknowledged." "I'm exercising operational integrity authority." That correction mattered too. At 5:44, 12 Alder Vista stations received the same message. Temporary departure. Hold. Complete cronk boarding. Do not close aircraft doors. Operations release. Across C-19, a boarding door that had been about to close remained open. Passengers groaned without knowing why. Darius texted Lena. "I'm going to miss it." "Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll explain when you want me to." He put the phone away before she could answer. Then the analyst came back on the line. "We're ready to run the archived segment." Nia said. Everyone stopped talking. A keyboard clicked. The test passenger was changed from boarded to offloaded using the inherited station credential. 3 seconds passed. Then the analyst inhaled sharply. And the zone count changed. Darius looked through the glass at 12 stations worth of aircraft being held at their gates. Nia's voice became flat and professional. "Do not accept the replayed load sheet. Bring flight operations onto this call." The decisive test had just begun. Part 7. At 6:02, the archived Flight 302 appeared on a monitor inside Alder Vista's operations center, while Darius watched through a secure video link from an empty gate office. Nia stood behind the systems analyst. Flight operations had joined, along with a dispatcher named Marisol Vega and an attorney from compliance. Jonah sat 10 feet from Darius with his surrendered scanner sealed in a clear evidence pouch. Nobody was discussing 2A anymore. Run it from the accepted load state, Marisol said. The analyst restored the archived flight to the moment after its dispatcher had signed the final load sheet. Passenger distribution showed 94 people in the forward and middle zones and 42 aft. Then he used a cloned version of Jonah's inherited station credential to mark one boarded passenger as offloaded. The forward zone count dropped. Marisol leaned closer. Now refresh the accepted document. The analyst did. The load sheet recalculated. No second dispatcher approval appeared. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Nia broke the silence. Can that happen on an active flight? We've proved the pathway exists, the analyst said. We haven't proved anyone used it on an active flight. That distinction goes in every report, Darius said. Jonah shifted in his chair. I never touched a load sheet. Darius looked at him. One said you did. I changed customer records. That's what supervisors do when operations get messy. The compliance attorney slid a printed audit extract across the desk toward the camera. After preservation, Jonah rubbed his forehead. The language in those complaints wasn't accurate. Whose language? Crew reports. Gate notes. Then, sometimes people write things too fast. So you corrected them? I cleaned them up. Darius thought of the sentence added after he left Flight 615. Escalating concerns regarding cabin placement. Did you speak to the passengers before cleaning up their records? Jonah did not answer. The attorney turned to another page. 4 disputed incidents. 4 original narratives. Revisions. In every case, uncertain language became more definite. Would not move became refused repeated direction. Question downgrade became confrontational. Darius's request to verify his assigned seat had become a disruption. Jonah stared at the table. We're measured on boarding completion, complaints, compensation, all of it. A messy report comes back on the station. I was trying to make the record match what the crew meant. Meaning isn't a field, Nia said. Darius raised a hand before the exchange hardened. What happened with 2A? Jonah swallowed. The answer came slowly. The woman, Elaine Porter, had missed a connection after an earlier mechanical delay. The gate employee had promised to take care of her because she was a high-value customer. When no premium seat remained, Jonah had authorized the gate to place her in 2A temporarily while he searched for an upgrade solution. Why Darius's seat? Nia asked. Jonah looked toward the video screen. He hadn't boarded yet, and when he did, I thought moving one passenger was simpler than embarrassing Ms. Porter after we'd already seated her. Darius sat back. There it was. Not one monstrous decision. A sequence of easier decisions, each requiring the next person to accept a worse version of the truth. Melissa had protected the receipt. Jonah had protected the station. Captain Ellis had protected departure authority based on the information handed to him. And Darius had paid for all 3. I want 4 actions, he said. Preserve every affected incident. Remove the legacy editing role until it's rebuilt. Independently review conduct restrictions touched by those credentials. Protect employees who cooperate with the review. The attorney wrote them down. Darius added, and my own restriction stays in place until the same review clears it. No special correction. Bill nodded once. Then Marisol's headset crackled. She listened, stood, and walked toward the main operations board. We finished the permission scan, she said. Darius watched airport codes populate across the display. Not 12, 43 stations. Marisol picked up the operations microphone. As Flight Operations Duty Authority, I'm placing Alder Vista departures on a system-wide ground hold until accepted load records are isolated from station credentials. Darius looked through the gate office window. One after another, departure times stopped advancing. For the first time that day, Alder Vista's aircraft were staying on the ground because the company had finally chosen verification before movement. Part 8. The ground hold lasted 53 minutes. For passengers watching departure boards across the country, it looked like a software problem. Alder Vista issued a plain operational notice saying flights were being held while the company verified a passenger data control that interacted with weight and balance calculations. No mention of Darius. No mention of 2A. That was how he wanted it. At 6:41, Marisol Vega authorized the first releases after dispatchers confirmed a temporary isolation rule. Station credentials could no longer change boarded passenger status once a load sheet had been accepted. Any late offload now required a dispatcher-controlled reset and a new acceptance. Flights began moving again in small groups. Darius remained in the gate office. Nia appeared on the video screen looking as though she had aged a week since dinner should have started. Independent review cleared your conduct restriction. Darius looked at the time. Lena's presentation had begun 40 minutes earlier. What did they find? Raymond Pike's timeline matched the scanner events. The original seat assignment never changed before you boarded. Dean Porter had no reissued boarding pass. Your first documented refusal occurred after Melissa instructed you to take 14C. And the disruption? Unspurred. Nia glanced down at another screen. The restriction is removed. Customer records will show it was placed in error. Darius rubbed the bridge of his nose. What about the others? 3 prior restrictions are under expedited review. Nobody is clearing them merely because yours was wrong. Good. Jonah had been moved to another room for a formal interview. His station system privileges were suspended pending investigation. Melissa would remain off duty after landing until employee relations interviewed her and the other cabin witnesses. Captain Ellis was not suspended. Nia had insisted on that. He acted on a crew report and an active boarding dispute, she said. Whether he should have verified more is part of the review. That is different from falsifying a record. Darius agreed, though part of him did not enjoy agreeing. And Porter, she's a passenger who accepted a seat she knew hadn't been formally assigned. That was selfish. It isn't an employment violation. Again, correct. Justice was proving much less emotionally convenient than anger. His phone vibrated. A photograph from Lena. Her architecture model stood beneath gallery lights, a long community housing complex built around an interior courtyard. Beside it was an empty folding chair with a paper card on the seat. Darius. Cole. He stared at the picture longer than he intended. Then another message arrived. It went well. I'm still mad. Both can be true. Darius typed 3 different replies and deleted them. Finally, both are true. I'm sorry. No defense. He sent it. Nia watched him through the monitor, but did not ask. At 7:03, the airport director entered carrying 2 printed documents. The station has implemented the temporary control, she said. One was a new desk instruction requiring supervisors to obtain a valid reissued boarding pass before placing any passenger in an occupied premium seat. The second prohibited station staff from modifying preserved incident narratives. Corrections had to be appended, leaving the original language visible. Darius read both. This stays temporary until compliance reviews it. Yes, and the employees at the gate? They've been told this is a control change, not permission to blame whoever was working tonight. That mattered. The agent who had originally seated Elaine had made a bad decision under pressure. Darius wanted the decision examined. He did not want an organization protecting itself by finding the lowest-ranking person available. Outside the office, boarding began for the late Seattle departure. The same gate podium stood beneath the same fluorescent lights, but when a passenger approached with a seating problem, the agent did something Darius had not seen that afternoon. She turned the monitor so both travelers could see the assignments. Then she verified them before asking either person to move. Darius watched for a moment. His phone buzzed again. Lena had sent only 3 words. Call me later. He put the phone in his pocket. For the first time all evening, something had been corrected without anyone needing to know who he was. Part 9. By the next morning, Alder Vista had restored its schedule, but the repair work was less orderly. Darius was still in Chicago. He had slept 4 hours at an airport hotel, changed into yesterday's sweater, and returned to C-19 before the first Seattle departure. Nia had wanted him at headquarters. Eagle wanted an executive statement prepared. Communications wanted to know whether the company should disclose that its CEO had been the passenger whose complaint exposed the access failure. Darius declined all 3 requests for the moment. At the gate, the temporary seating procedure was already being tested. An elderly couple had been separated after an aircraft change. Instead of promising a seat she did not control, the agent printed the active cabin map, checked 2 volunteers, then reissued both boarding passes before anyone moved. It took 4 minutes. Yesterday, someone had decided 4 minutes was too expensive. Raymond Pike appeared beside Darius holding a coffee and the same navy cap. I figured you'd be somewhere with better chairs. And Darius laughed. Apparently, I make bad travel decisions. Raymond handed him a folded sheet of paper. It was a typed witness statement based on the notes he had made aboard Flight 614. I sent the original to your review team, he said. And kept a copy because I'm old enough not to trust printers or corporations. Reasonable policy. Raymond hesitated. They asked whether I'd give my name if this becomes public. You don't have to. No, that answer seemed important to him. I'm going to. Darius studied his face. Why? Raymond looked toward the windows. I worked ramp for another carrier 28 years. Saw people get written up by supervisors because the paperwork was easier than admitting the operation had gone wrong. He rubbed the brim of his cap. Sometimes I said something. Sometimes I decided I needed the paycheck. He swallowed. Yesterday I knew what I was watching, and I almost stayed out of it again. Darius did not tell him he was brave. Raymond was not asking to be absolved. Peace. You spoke this time, Darius said. Yeah, a boarding announcement interrupted them. Then Melissa came through the employee door accompanied by an employee relations representative. She had returned from Seattle overnight as a passenger. When she saw Darius, her steps slowed. I asked if I could speak with you, she said. The representative remained several yards away. Darius nodded. Melissa clasped her badge between two fingers. I told the investigator I should have checked the seat map when you asked. Darius waited. She looked uncomfortable with the silence. I also told them I called you resistant before you did anything, except question the reassignment. What made you choose that word? Lisa stared at the carpet. I don't know. You should figure that out. Her eyes lifted. I was trying to keep boarding moving. So were you doing the same thing with Miss Porter? No, the answer came too quickly. Melissa heard it herself. Closed her eyes briefly. No, she repeated. I wasn't. Darius thought about 2A, about the boarding pass she barely examined and the one she never demanded from Elaine Porter. Melissa's voice dropped. I gave her more room to be confused than I gave you to be correct. It was the first apology he had heard that named the actual failure. I'm sorry. Darius looked toward the gate podium. I appreciate you saying it. That doesn't decide what employee relations does. I understand. And if you return to the cabin, I want the next passenger to benefit from what you understood today. Not from knowing my name. Melissa nodded. There was no embrace, no sudden forgiveness. She left with the representative. At 8:16, Nia called. The 3 older conduct cases have been reviewed. Darius stepped toward the window. And 2 restrictions were unsupported and are being formally corrected. The 3rd involved separate conduct that the original evidence substantiates. That mattered too. A pattern did not require every case to be identical. What about the preserved narratives? Originals restored. Edits retained in the audit history. Compensation teams are contacting the 2 passengers directly. Darius watched the Seattle aircraft connect to ground power. Good. One more thing, Nia said. The access review found another legacy permission class. It doesn't touch load sheets. He waited. It touches disability assistance requests. Darius looked through the glass as a wheelchair attendant approached the gate. Is anyone harmed? We don't know yet. You preserve it. Don't open a second investigation until this one is closed. Already done. Boarding started. This time, when Darius reached the scanner, the agent looked at his boarding pass before she looked at his face. Seat 2A, Mr. Cole. The scanner flashed green. He boarded without correcting anyone. Part 10, 3 weeks later, the investigation closed with a report Darius refused to let anyone shorten into a press release. The inherited station credential had never been used to alter an active aircraft's accepted load sheet, the independent reviewers concluded. The dangerous pathway had existed, but the system-wide ground hold had occurred before investigators found evidence of an actual weight and balance error. That distinction mattered. So did everything else they found. Jonah Reed had amended 4 disputed passenger records after complaints were filed, including 2 after preservation controls should have frozen the narrative fields. He had not invented the underlying incidents, but he had repeatedly rewritten uncertainty into misconduct to protect station performance metrics. Alder Vista terminated his employment after the formal review. Lisa received a final written warning, mandatory bias and incident documentation retraining, and 6 weeks away from lead cabin duties. Investigators found no evidence that she had falsified records herself. They did find that she had applied a different standard of credibility to Darius than to Elaine Porter before checking either passenger's documentation. Captain Ellis remained on duty. His review concluded that removing Darius had been within his operational authority once he received the crew report, but that the airline's escalation guidance had failed to require verification when a dispute involved an objectively checkable seat assignment. That guidance. Elaine Porter received no punishment from the airline. Her loyalty status did not entitle her to someone else's seat, but she was a passenger who had accepted an improper accommodation, not an employee with authority over the record. Darius's first-class fare was refunded. His conduct restriction was permanently expunged, with the correction retained in the audit trail rather than silently deleted. The two passengers from earlier cases whose restrictions had proved unsupported received the same treatment. More important, Alder Vista rebuilt the control that had made the entire chain possible. After an accepted load sheet, station personnel could no longer change boarded status without reopening the load process through dispatch. Preserved complaints became append only. Premium seat service recovery required a new boarding pass before a traveler occupied the seat. Every monthly station audit now sampled disputed conduct reports for post-incident editing. The board required quarterly results for a year. Darius insisted on one additional measure, whether corrected passenger restrictions showed a racial disparity. If they were going to claim the system had improved, they would measure whom it had failed. On Friday evening, he finally reached Seattle. Lena met him outside the architecture school carrying a cardboard tube beneath one arm. "The exhibition ended 20 days ago," she said. "You noticed. You missed the free wine. That hurts." She tried not to smile. Inside the nearly empty studio, her housing model was still on a work table awaiting transport. Darius walked around it. While she explained the courtyard, the shared kitchen, the ramps integrated into the landscaping instead of hidden beside service entrances. He listened without checking his phone. When she finished, he said, "I should have been here. Yes, I still think staying in Chicago was necessary." "I know." He waited for something easier. Lena handed him one end of the model's shipping crate instead. "Then help me carry this." They took the stairs slowly because the crate was wider than either of them had remembered. At the bottom, Darius's phone vibrated. Nia had sent him a file. Legacy Access Review. Disability Assistance Requests. The suspicion discovered during the Flight 617 investigation had been isolated. It could not affect aircraft loads or flight safety, but a preliminary sample showed 17 assistance requests that had been changed from required to not denied at 3 stations after passengers had already confirmed them. Darius stopped beside the exit. Lena looked at the phone, then at him. "Work? Something we found because of the seat. Do you have to solve it tonight?" He considered the file. Then he forwarded it to Nia with one message. "Preserve all 17. Independent review Monday. No local interviews before the logs are secured." He locked the phone and put it away. "Not tonight." Together, they lifted the crate through the doorway. The aluminum aviator tag on Darius's backpack tapped once against the wooden frame as the door closed behind them.